You were so hard to hold on to. With every tear I cry, I start to realize I'll never get over you.
I'm loving right now. I'm just loving the music. I don't even want to start.
Guitar is a great help.
Yeah, hey? Oh, you stopped playing. Okay, that's my cue. Welcome to episode 36 of Living Your Life with Leanne Lang, the podcast brought to you by Extension Marketing. And for more information, you can always check out extensionmarketing.com. Séan McCann is a Newfoundland boy who grew up on the rock, eventually went on to become a founding member of one of Canada's biggest bands called Great Big Sea. The group had fun songs, some hit songs, big hits, and found amazing success selling millions of albums across Canada and around the world. Séan also found love, he had kids, and then eventually he hit rock bottom. So to take a paragraph from his website, because I thought the website, the About section, was just really beautifully written. John Lennon once sang, "You can live a lie until you die. One thing you can't hide is when you're crippled inside." Now, Séan eventually left Great Big Sea, publicly admitting a secret past where he used alcohol to mask the pain of sexual abuse by a priest. With his boys, who I have to say are just amazing, two wonderful boys, and his wife, Andrea, who's become really one of my greatest friends, he found the motivation to be able to face the truth, to be able to look back and to overcome his demons. So today we're talking about that journey as a singer, a songwriter, a husband, a father, and really most effectively right now, a public speaker and a mental health advocate. And with him on all of these different trips and all these places that he goes, he always has with him Old Brown by his side. Old Brown is his guitar, and there's Old Brown right there, who's actually made it in to the studio with us. Séan, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you, amigo.
Oh, I love it. I love that you brought the guitar. I think it's been with you for so long. Like when you wrote your first song, I think, right?
Yeah, it's my first guitar, and I bought them for $800 at a little small place in St. John's called Davis Music. And at the time, Leanne, I didn't know how to play guitar. I was singing in bands, and I was being told what key to sing in by the guitar players and the accordion players and stuff. And I felt like it wasn't the right key for me sometimes, so I wanted my independence. So I bought this guitar as it was an attempt to win freedom. But I didn't know how to play a single chord. And now I know all three chords. And I can play in whatever key I want to do. So, but he's been more than an instrument. He's really been a friend to me. Like, especially since I've made these big changes, which really cost me a lot of friends, quote unquote friends. This is the guitar this is the friend that never left. And that's how I feel about music now. Even though I've been involved in it for so long, it almost took me 30 years to figure out what the real reason for music is, and that is to help us, just like a good friend would.
You know, because sometimes I would look at it like a security blanket, but it's far more than that. Like to have, Old Brown with you, it's not the security blanket. It's really kind of the keeper of everything for you.
For me, it's where, the truth can be a hard thing to face, but I believe it's necessary to get anything productive done. Like if you want to solve a problem, you have to acknowledge it. But this is a weapon for doing that, like dealing with difficult things. So yes, it is a security blanket. I always bring it no matter where I go, even if I don't play it, because I want them around because I feel that friendship. But I know if I need to do something, if I need to do the hard work, which is always based in the truth, and the thing we as humans we avoid the most, this is a way I can get in there and do that.
We're going to take a really interesting journey on this chat, and I'm really grateful for you coming in because schedule is crazy busy, even trying to keep up socially with when is Séan in town.
Kids are a huge time suck.
Can you imagine that? So I love this. We met actually in studio. You came to CTV Morning Live. It was the first time that we met. I think you were going to be playing at the NAC. There was something that you were promoting.
It may have been the Guitars for Vets thing.
No, that was way after.
I've been here a while now. Yeah.
You haven't. So you guys were new to the city.
I was doing a show, I guess, and I came in and I met you, and I was lucky. Sometimes you get lucky.
Okay, and we started talking, and it was so funny because all of my co-hosts and everything, I'm like, does Sean not remind you of Tony, my husband? And I was like, there was something very similar between the two of you. And
yeah, she's very attractive as well.
I'll let him know that you said that, Sean. You know, like different backgrounds. I mean, Tony had a lot of the kind of the athleticism, not that you didn't, but like both still managed to kind of find your way into the arts. And I liked you. Like, I just like, oh my God, you reminded me of Tony. And I'm like, and you have 2 young boys who are the exact same age as Keegan and Finn are exactly the same age as Andy and Jamie. And I'm like, okay, like this is going to be, you're new to the city. Let's meet up. Let's get our families together. Let me introduce you to people in Ottawa. And then I realized that I had to pass the gatekeeper. You're like... I had to pass the approval of Andrea, which didn't happen because you kind of tweet person and you kind of message somebody, and then it wasn't until we were at the ambassador's house. There was where
you met Andrea. That's
where
right.
I met Andrea, and I got the clearance. It was like I met Andrea. She gave us the all clear. We passed through the gate, and from then on, it's been really quite
Vicky
nice.
Heyman.
Yeah, it was the Heymans.
The prior ambassador. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was
when we wanted to be able to support and follow up with our Americans.
Yeah, exactly. Things were lighter.
I don't think we're going back to the ambassador's
I haven't been invited back. No,
no,
I'm too left-sided.
And I value this friendship. I think it's been great. I love the fact that you and Tony actually have this kind of this unique bond. I think, in just being able to talk from an artistic. Yeah,
I'm always been interested in the visual arts, and Tony's a great artist, and so that struck me right away. His talent. But he's very astute with music. He listens to a lot of music while he works, and every time we talk, it's sometimes it's about visual stuff, but generally he has a lot of questions about bands and music.
Yeah.
Like, he's fascinated by it, which I find really interesting. And I think we both come from a hockey background, which is weird to find ourselves in this situation. And I think, well, he's multi-sports, but...
no, but you guys have that.
We have a similar path, yeah, for sure. He's a good fellow. He understands me, I think.
I think he does. I think he gets sometimes the torment, too, of creating something and then having it opened up to the world to see and kind of waiting for that approval, or...
Torment is a good word.
Is torment a good word? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and but also surviving, if you choose the life in the arts world, then commercially, how do you make a living, and so not only do you surrender the better part of your heart to the public, but you also have to find a way to earn money, and as a painter and as a songwriter, those particular mediums are under a lot of pressure in the technology advanced world, where what we actually do monetarily has been devalued, in many ways, because it's so easily shared,
The conversations around the dinner table have always been great. Andrea, by the way, your wife, is the most amazing cook ever. So anytime we're sitting around that island, it's just, we're in for great food and really good conversation. And eventually the kids destroy the basement in some form of whatever game they're opting to play.
Certain level of destruction.
Always.
Hard to be small in our house. It's a battle.
There's different battles that are faced in the house. And one of the things when we first came over was, do I bring a bottle of wine?
Yeah.
I remember it kind of being like, I wasn't sure. And because we were kind of socializing, I never knew you as the old Séan McCann.
No,
and
probably a good thing.
I have only known you in this kind of like the second phase of your life. And so it's interesting to kind of sometimes have to remind myself that there was a very different past to you.
Yes. I mean, there was the phrase used to describe me or relationships with my friends, and they would often say, last night, I got McCanned last night. That was literally, I became an adverb? So if you were out with me, my former self, you were out late, and you're going to be damaged by the next morning. I was a pretty intense drinker and user of any kind of intoxicant, and that was my life for 35 years. So the changes were not small. So the person you see before you and the person you met was very different. I don't think at my core, I think I'm similar in many ways personality-wise, but it was a big thing to put down. And and you showing up, but I'm okay with it now, like for whatever reason, and I can't even explain it. But I am not tempted by that. Like when you show up with a glass of wine or whatever, I just, reasonable drinking is not something I'm drawn to. Like I know that I can't be there, but I'm okay with you.
Okay, let's go back if we can, because we're kind of like, this is where we are now, and this is wonderful, and there's friendships, and there's life, and there's stories to be told. And it was a very different start. So you grew up in Newfoundland. You were born on the Rock.
I was born in Newfoundland, a little place called Carbonear, which is about 2 hours from St. John's, where I was eventually raised in the Catholic school system. And back there, like there was the Catholic school board and what we call the Protestant school board, which is all the other churches basically. And Newfoundland is that was pretty much it though. Like Newfoundland is pretty white, and Western. We didn't have many ethnic diversity. It was Irish or English, Catholic, Protestant, and versus was very much part of it. On the hockey rink or in the churches, and that's where I came up. That's where I grew up.
Siblings, like, was it a big household? I mean,
two brothers, and I'm the oldest, so I started it out. And there's a fairly big spread. Myself and my first brother is 10 months apart. That's called Irish twins.
Yeah.
And my other younger brother is Kevin. He's in Halifax. He's 7 years younger.
Okay, so there's a bit of a difference. You were active sports? Like, were you musically inclined as a kid? Like, did you enjoy singing? Were you drawn to music?
Always
Where
loved
were you drawn
singing.
to? Because when you're on the Rock, like, I don't want to say there's not that much, but you find funds how, where?
We entertain ourselves, but early, like when I was a kid, like there's a recording of me singing. I was singing before I could walk. There's a recording of me singing the night that Patty Murphy died before I could walk, before I was 2.
Really?
I would talk
You
early.
could talk, okay,
I could
yeah.
talk really early.
Yeah.
And singing was how I was always there. So there's all recordings of that. I got to find them and get them digitized.
There's recordings of it.
There's we pull
cool.
it out every Christmas to listen to some of these things, and here's me singing Patty Murphy and the Wild Colonial Boy when I'm 2 years old. And apparently I was singing all the time, which is like Finnegan is like that, my son now. But when I got to kindergarten, grade 1, they knew I had some musical aptitude, but they put me in piano lessons with the nuns, honestly, it didn't work out for me. So after 1 year of that, I stopped. So I didn't really learn how to read music. And again, I didn't pick up a guitar until I was 23. So I was, I went down a different path. I think it's what I've learned is if you want to go down the path of music, if you want your children to, the best thing is not force them to do anything, or the best thing you can do is find someone who's actually a leader, a mentor. And the best teachers I've found are the ones that ask their students, what do you want to learn how to play? And when you know what you want to learn how to play, you will play it.
But you didn't know you wanted to learn how to play until you're in a band and they're telling you to sing a certain key and you're like, I need to go figure out how to learn guitar. Like, had you been given the option at 10 to say, Sean, would you have said, so. Would I have liked to? You would have.
I think I would have been more interested in that. And, hockey was like the main Canadian religion anyway, so that's where we all gravitated to. But I really regret not having put in some extra time then. Like that wasn't seen as a viable or important thing, And I've come to learn that for not financial reasons, but mental health reasons, like music is a huge. I wish I had more of it when I was under the duress, and, for the bad times in my teenage years. I didn't have access to music then, in the sense that I could play it or sing it. Mm-hmm. I was in full hockey mode, and I could listen to it, but I didn't really know what it was about. I didn't get involved with it until I was 19, 20, 21.
So it wasn't like you were listening to what lyrics, the songwriting or the lyrics of a song or anything that would
maybe, like I remember
you,
listening to Pink Floyd, The Wall. That's the first record that I really was drawn into. And in retrospect, I can see why. But the lyrics, I remember I related because it was, it was at the time, when I was having a really hard time, and I could relate to those things, and I started to have the inkling that music was more important than I knew.
When you talk about, going through a rough time and the dark days, from when you were growing up, at what age? Like you were Sundays at church.
Every Sunday.
You were every Sunday at church, and the church important in the household, like.
Yeah, in particular, I think we were Catholics. We were not lapsed, not lazy Catholics. We were at every Sunday, and my family had a history with the church, which I've been working on a book with Andrea, and I've digging into this. My great uncle was the first new bishop that came from Newfoundland to be a Newfoundland bishop, and my mother's family, her parents worked for the church, for him. A lot of them did. So my family lived in the shadow of the church probably more than most. We were literally in their house. And those people, those priests and those bishops, they had extreme power back in the day. And that extended to when I was a kid. But I'm trying to figure out what happened to me, how the abuse was overlooked or how it could even exist. Like, we seem to have opened our eyes to it. It's a different generation with the Me Too generation and the many horrible things that the Catholic Church has now admitted to and they're trying to hold accountable to. They've done a poor job of being accountable, but at least now we know what can happen.
Well, I think there's been a media base to it. There's been storytelling. There's been exposés. There's been movies, which I think help. I think an outsider understand like how widespread it was and how it was so well hidden.
Yeah, it was systemic, and I believe that it's a really hard subject in my family, and it's hard for me to poke around here, and I'm having a hard time with the book that way.
You mean poking around to write this book? To
figure out like what I'm trying to figure out. I know what happened to me, and I know what the repercussions were and the damage and stuff. But what I keep trying to look for, and I guess it's typical of many victims, is why, how, and because my parents were not unreasonable people. They were smart people, right? But I think that indoctrination is a dangerous thing.
Because you spoke out, you mentioned it to your parents, like when you had said something's happening.
I said it in a song, I said it in Hold Me Mother, and then I said it. Then after a couple of months of that song sinking in, and I said it. But honestly, it's not something my parents wanted to hear about. Even if it was true.
How old were you when you were able to say it out loud to your parents?
Oh, that was 5 years ago. I'm 51, so I was 45, 46. Like, whenever Hold Me Mother, that record came out, that's how I thought I thought it was pretty clear in that song. But people don't want to hear truth that they don't want to hear,
So as it was happening, as you were a child in your teenage years going through this experience, there was no speed. There was.
Oh no, that was impossible for me to. There was no. I couldn't see a way. This was just something I was going to bury as a secret. I didn't think this was going to go over well, and I don't think I was wrong. It didn't go over well when I was 46. And I think that's why. I think that's why indoctrination is so dangerous, because it's what it does is create a sense of there's no freedom to question. The truth is not important when you're indoctrinated. A truth, our version of the truth, which in the Catholic Church is the priest has all the power. You don't question the priest. The priest is God. So what do you do when God commits a crime?
At what age did the abuse start for you?
15.
And it lasted until you were able to get it.
Yeah, it lasted a little while, but it all kind of happened. Started on a retreat, pilgrimage to Rome, which is where my first drink was served to me by this priest, and the abuse happened on that trip, and. It didn't last long after that. I mean, emotionally, it was even worse. but it was just it was something that really still can't really figure out. But it was something I chose to bury. It was a truth that I really couldn't handle, and I think there was a lot of shame. But this priest had endeared himself to me and to my family, and what hurt most was we looked at him as a friend. He was my brother. He was a second father. He was a son to my father. The betrayal was intense, and that's what hurts. That's what hurts the most today.
Is still the betrayal, like, of a person that you had looked at as a friend or as a father figure, or
I was groomed to, and I was built up, and at the time when I started high school, I was bullied. So I was vulnerable anyway, and I think that's what these people do. They look for vulnerable people. I was a smart kid. I was a good kid, but he was attracted to me, I guess, or whatever. But it was premeditated, in retrospect, and it just hurt. It hurt an enormous amount, and it still hurts. So the problem I have is, how do you cope with it when it hurts so much? And a coping mechanism is booze.
Did you start to drink after that? I mean,
I started to drink with him. He started me drinking, but I never stopped. I mean, he went away eventually, but I just kept. By the time I finished high school, I would argue that I was an alcoholic, and that my future was very much different than what it would have been if all that hadn't happened.
The drinking for you wasn't that you were constantly in search of a drink. It was more when you had the drink, it was excessive.
Yeah, I mean, I would drink a lot. I could stop. I mean, I could function. I was a highly functioning alcoholic, but I always knew I'd have all kinds of opportunities and free drink, and I'd be, Great Big Sea was a party band, and it wasn't an act. Like we drank. I drank the most, for sure.
Okay, well, when did Great Big Sea, like, when did the musical aspect of, because I get that the party continued, especially with this band. Like, at what age were you when that started to form? Like, the band, the music, that this was going to be something that you could do for a living?
Well, in high school, I played hockey at the high school hockey, which was a big thing back then. So I played defense, and I was pretty good. I was never really super competitive, but I was good enough to make the team all the time and dependable. When I got to university, though, I ended up doing I wasn't good enough to be junior. I wasn't that good, so I had no athletic thing, and music started to come in. I ended up doing a philosophy degree. I was searching then for reasons why.
I'm looking up.
The reason I went into that is because I could freely ask questions and really dig into why the big whys, which is good and bad, because what I've learned, unless you have a faith that explains it for you, there is no answer.
There was nothing you were going to find in a textbook.
No. So,
or there was no wise professor that could give you that answer.
Well, there's no right why for I don't believe for anything, and that's the problem with organized religion in my mind, like in indoctrination, is because it's like, here, it preys on people who are, hey, we need answers. We can't live this life because we don't know what happens after it. Why are we here? And religions have come up with the answers to those impossible to answer questions, in my opinion. But at least pursuing a philosophy degree, I became somewhat comfortable with the fact that there really wasn't a right answer to anything like that, and there was a million ways to think about it. So I learned how to think, which is good and bad, I guess. But I also, to replace probably the hockey thing that I was,
Yeah, you went from being at the rink all the time to not making a team in university, and then you're left with.
Yeah, and I'm doing a philosophy degree,
right.
So all I did, I wasn't under the math deadlines. I abandoned that language, and I had all kinds. I found myself in pubs and in St. John's, working in bars. In St. John's, I would argue, well, it has the most bars per capita, so that's easy. But it also has a really strong music scene. been known for it for years, and not just traditional music, rock and roll, reggae, blues. It's the kind of place where a lot of artists wash up and stay. International artists, British guys, Irish guys, all kinds of great singers. So I fell into that. I mean, and as I mentioned, like at the age of 2, it was like music went away for a while, but then I was able to sing, and I was asked to sing. I used to sing at parties, which were all every night, and I was able to sing in key. And I was approached. Bob asked me to sing in his first band, and that was Rankin Street. That turned into our first little band, and I loved it. I was like, yeah, I can do this. I'll do this instead, And I've always had a lot of energy, and so ended up being the kind of the agent or manager of that little band. And we used to play 5 nights a week in all these bars. We had no shortage, and we used to make $100 each a night, which was a ton of money then. And you know what's the strange thing? It's the same now. It's still $100 a night. It hasn't changed in 35 years.
You invested well. Plus, I would take it free booze while you're on stage,
free
and
booze,
there you go, and you're feeding,
girls would be seeing us under the lights, and
You look good under those lights, right?
Well, depending on the lights, I think. But there you go.
So you're playing your way through university.
Yeah, and I made enough money to pay off my loan. Yeah.
You're making money. You're playing music, and you're partying hard.
Constantly, every night.
Did you graduate with a philosophy degree? Did you
I
actually? You graduate. What university?
At Memorial University of St. John's.
Is that the big university out there?
Yeah, and it is pretty big. I think it's like 18,000 students there.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
So, and it only opened in the 70s, so it's not been around a long time, but it's, I mean, I don't know how it rates university-wise. I think it has a strong medical school. I don't know about the philosophy department. I have no idea how it would rate. I don't know how I would rate as a philosopher, but it put me on a path. And
although I have to say, because I know you're a big reader, you read a lot, and I would think that still it follows there was an actual like an innate interest in it because it still is with you. You're still constantly reading.
Yeah, I'm always drawn to the hard questions too, right? Like I don't read light stuff. So philosophy was a good fit. But I mean, that whole scene of being a philosophy student, if you're a songwriter, you're a philosophy student. So, and that's where I ended up being. I mean, I thought I'd be a lawyer. Like, as part of me argued that if a philosophy undergraduate degree was not a bad degree to have because it taught you how to think, and you could, if you want to go into the law profession. But I'm glad that didn't happen. So, I ended up, being a songwriter, which is far more risky, but you'd probably do a lot less damage.
When did the pairing with Alan and Great Big Sea then occur?
Well, Bob and I were in this band called Rankin Street with Daryl. Found Daryl at the Rose and Thistle pub, which is a small bar. And Daryl was he was a good guitar player, but he also knew every song like he was a human jukebox. And he was a real nice guy, and we hit it off. We used to enjoy having a drink together, among other things. And I'll leave that at that. But
he would get McCann with you.
He would get McCann. He was the early on getting McCann, and arguably I got Daryl a few nights too. And so we got along really well, myself and Daryl for sure. And we wanted to be in a band, and so we kept at it. But we weren't that good. Like, we weren't good with the audience. We all wanted to play. We were focused really on the traditional music, and we could only get so far because there were so many traditional bands. And we eventually just ran out of gas. And we're like, okay, well, we all finished our degrees, and I went on and started doing a master's in folklore, which was really boring. And but while I was doing that, I kept my eye on what was happening in Newfoundland, and bands started to get signed by record companies. I think the first one was Ron Hines, the Irish Descendants got signed, Ashley McIsaac, the Rankins, and they were all this Celtic bands, and we were like, we just quit at the wrong time because we were good, like we were as good as them, arguably. And so I was always out, and I started doing solo stuff because I couldn't put the guitar down once I figured it out. And I left a gig I was doing at a bar called Nautical Nelly's, walked across the street to the Rose and Thistle where I met Daryl 5 years earlier. And Alan Doyle was in a band called Staggering Home. And it was with another guy named John. I can't remember his last name, but they were doing like a McLean and McLean show. It was a blue it was a comedy parody music show. So there's two comedians essentially, Alan being one and John the other guy, with two guitars, doing a lot of shtick. It was blue in nature, but also parodying like Sesame Street songs, but in
So there was a personality there, right? Which is what between the three of you that were kind of the music and kind of just being really good, there was a personality with Alan that.
Yes, and
there was a draw there.
There was no one. The bar probably had 6 people in it, and I know one of those. There was 2 tables. One of them was his mom and dad and his sister, and so the place was empty. I was there on my break to get away from the bar I was at, which was full at the time, and I just wanted to get out of there because there's no dressing room or anything. But I walked in, and he was doing the show honestly like he was in Wembley. Like he had no sense of proportion.
That there were only 6 people in the
audience.
audience.
Didn't care. He was transported. He was one of those very few people who had enough sense. He brought his own lights in, because all these bars didn't have lights. And I had figured this out, but most bands played in the dark. They really weren't paying attention to what it looked like. Alan was, like he lit himself up, and played. And I could see right away. It's like this guy wants the attention. And if you're in a band, that's a huge asset to have, and they're rare. Like they're.
Do most people in the band just want to be in the band?
Most people just
don't want to be.
Yeah, it's really not everyone. Wants to be the front man or the front woman. Not most people are not able to, and a lot of the ones that are able to do that have a real extrovert personality that really want that attention. They're probably not good enough singers or players, but Alan was good enough on all those levels. So, the great bands have them, Steve Tyler, Mick Jagger, and I'm not saying Alan is as good as those 2 guys, but he is that guy. Mm-hmm. And he is quite good, and we were lucky to find him. But I talked to him, and I knew that if we had that, I knew what we were missing, and I sensed that he could fill that hole. And I could go on at length about the pros and cons of that type of person.
Yes.
But we'll let it rest that he was the man for the job, and without him we wouldn't have been Great Big Sea, without a doubt. And
how
he
did
was a missing piece.
You approach him when he's finished his performance with 6 people in the bar and lights on him? How did that formation then happen, and how did the name it's catchy, right? People, you mentioned Great Big Sea, people know it, and there's always a catchy song that they'll sing with it.
Yep.
How was that? What was the start of that? Who came up with the name?
Well, we didn't first, because Bob had left and he was gone. But myself and Daryl and Alan had a jam. I said, well, I think we should jam together and see what this is, because he wasn't from the traditional world at all. He was doing 80s covers. He was a rocker, rock and roll, 80s rock and roll. And so that was a good influence to have. So we had a party one night and jammed and figured out what we could do together. I think one of the first songs we learned together was "Lovers in a Dangerous Time."
It's a good song.
Yeah, and we learned the Bare Naked Ladies version of that.
Okay,
that's what was big at the time. So I think that was the first song we learned, and that came from his repertoire. And we taught him a traditional song, which was probably Mary Mac or something, or Patty Murphy. So, but when we played it together, we were like, wow. First thing happened was everything got faster, and the other thing we were able to do was sing. We had a natural harmony, which were important in Newfoundland. So that worked. Musically it worked, and then we just had to do a show. Our first name for the band was Best Kind, which is a Newfoundlandese for "we're pretty good."
Really? Say it again.
Best Kind. Really.
Best Kind.
Everything in Newfoundland, you'd say, how are things going? How are you? And you would answer, "Best kind."
Okay.
As in, I'm fine.
I'm fine, or I'm good.
Fine.
Yeah,
I'm okay. And we did a couple of shows at the Rose and Thistle, which again, the Rose and Thistle holds about 50 people. This is a small place. And I've had at least 300 people tell me they were at those shows. So I'm sure they weren't. But we did a couple of shows, and we were instantly labeled as St. John's Supergroup because of Rankin Street was a popular band. And now that we had Alan, we were all going to be, so it was Rankin Street and Staggering Home, and they had their little following too, I guess. And then Bob came back. We were doing a talent show opening up for the Irish Descendants, and he got up on stage with us and played the fiddle. at the time, or the fiddle, and then it just, okay, we can do this. Like we're as good as anyone else is getting record deals, so let's make a record. So we made a record, and we were by then we'd learned, I guess myself and Bob had learned a lot about what could go wrong, because we'd spent 4 years in a band together that didn't go anywhere. So we're like, what do we need? We need a record. Why? Because we need to give it to a record company guy to get a record deal. Okay. So we did, and we did a few gigs and used the money to make a record which was the Great Big Sea record. And, we had that in our hands before we started to play as Great Big Sea. We had a plan. We had a 2-year plan. We sat down with my dad, who stood up with like a Bristol board or whatever, and here's what we're going to do. Because he was concerned that I would waste my life in this pursuit. But he was willing to give me, or he advised us, like, give it 2 years, and if you get to these are your goals. And we set out, and that's how we're organized. We were organized. We weren't the most sober bunch, but we had goals, and we were determined. And that's why we were successful, because we were all determined, and our eyes were focused on the same goal.
How many years did you find this great, fun success? Like, how long were you kind of feeling like, I'm living the life right now? I'm happy in terms of not yet facing demons, but you're high productive, your songs are doing well, you're making money, you're touring, and let's just say you haven't overdrank yourself yet. Were there a couple of years, like, was there
the first 10, before Daryl left, there was a different, it ended, Daryl left when he needed to leave, but it was just, our energy at the beginning was so positive and so infectious that's why we were successful.
People just like being around you guys. You were fun.
We were fun, and we weren't particularly good, but we had this super energy, and we were like, our approach was, we weren't very good at players. Like, we didn't have a Ashley McIsaac. We didn't have someone who was none of us were excellent. Like, we didn't have a star player. We could sing, and we had this energy. So we approached traditional music like the Ramones. We had that kind of really simple but fast energy. And that's what singled us out from the polished groups like Natalie McMaster or the Rankins and stuff. Like, they are all really good players, way better players. But we proved that wasn't all there was. We had something else. We were interesting. We were a little bit dangerous too. Like, we were, if you flirted with us, we'd be there. Like, we were out for that. We were up for whatever. We put it all out there. We had nothing to lose. So there was a real recklessness about the band, and which is attractive, I guess, in retrospect. But that, as soon as you get successful and when you have money in the bank and things aren't risky anymore, that's when you become kind of settled. That's the enemy of art in many ways. The lack of hunger is the worst thing that can happen for a songwriter or a painter, I think, because you're not driven. You're not out there like the wolf hunting, for that next great idea. You become complacent, which is what we did.
How many years, though, did you have of a good run that you would say that it was out, there was energy, you weren't complacent yet, you were having... How many years? This podcast is brought to you by Extension Marketing. They are a new breed of marketing agency that acts as your virtual marketing department, designing and implementing cost-effective marketing strategies that will grow your business. I can speak to this personally, as I've been using the Extension Marketing team to help me launch and grow my business. Founder Pat Whalen has been a lifesaver for me, a genuine coach, guiding me along the way into uncharted territory. Tell them you're a friend of the show and receive a free 1-hour consultation. Check them out at extensionmarketing.com.
I would say to be, consistently on, while we were pulling the sled the same way, and I would say that's the first decade. And after the first decade, when Daryl left, that was more damage than we at the time realized. And we in many ways financially we started to really focus on that part of the thing and the machine and how to make the most money. But ultimately, artistically, our output went down.
How was your drinking at that point?
Oh, it was, I graduated from drinking pints to drinking really expensive scotch. because I could afford it. I remember there's a bar in St. John's that I kind of became the unofficial owner of, I think, and called the Duke. And I remember being out one night and I was drinking Lagavulin or some expensive scotch, and someone was like, asked me, how much are they anyway? And I looked at the actual owner, Terry, who was a great fella, a funny guy, and I said, Terry, how much are these? And he said, Sean, he just laughed. He said, what do you care? You don't care. You've never asked that question. You've been drinking here for 10 years. You don't know, and I'm not going to tell you. You don't need to know.
You don't need to know.
Exactly.
Are you married? Like, have you met Andrea at this point yet? Like,
no, I didn't
okay.
meet her until, well, I guess it was just shortly after that, though. It was the second half of so it was at the beginning of,
You've had a good decade run of being on your own, and
things were kind of changing, but we were still, I mean, even then, we were still able to, my songwriting was improving slowly.
What were you writing about that it was improving?
More about, I think, concepts, not so much about drinking.
You weren't writing yet the types of songs that you wrote.
No,
like that took years to develop.
Yeah. But we got away with a lot on very little as far as songwriting clout. We had some hooky stuff, but it didn't say much, And
no, but it was catchy. Your songs went on when the bar wanted to kind of get everyone riled up. You put on a great big C and everyone's jumping up and down. And
I know, but that's brand. What do you call it? Cross pollination. Like what were we selling now? We were selling beer. We were selling a good time. Mm-hmm. And we wrote songs that sold a good time. So we were a great, liquor companies and breweries loved us. Newfoundland tourism loved us. And we had a very strong and very simple brand. And it's a brand that doesn't allow for anything negative, really. Like there was no darkness in any of our lyrics. It was all positive, positive, positive. Everything's cool. You're okay. I'm okay. There's no problems here. Just have a pint and we'll all be good. And here we go. And every night, and
you almost can try to believe it in a sense.
Well, that's what we were selling,
yeah.
And quite believably, and I guess maybe for a long time I wanted to believe that, but that's not the reality. And there was no room for what we were selling. There was no room for actual reality in that product. So when you started to dig into that stuff, like, let's allow for the darkness. That was not going to happen in that band or that brand.
No, it couldn't.
No.
It's not what people were buying.
It's not what Warner Brothers wanted to hear. It's not what the band wanted to hear. But I was writing those things. I started to kind of like Andrea, having met her in Colorado, was a game changer in many ways because I started to, I'd found the right person in my life that I could talk to her about anything.
So Andrea's from Minnesota.
She
was kind of finding herself in Vail. Is it in Vail that you guys met?
Yeah.
I know it was a ski town, yeah.
She was coming out of a divorce and some family issues of her own, so we were kind of well suited, I guess.
Yeah, and I think she, in the midst of it, didn't really quite realize where she was going. I think she thought she wasn't quite sure the address or wherever it was that you had
like
said
many
you
Americans,
lived.
her Canadian geography was not strong, so
yes.
she thought she was going to Finland, I believe.
Yes, that was it. She thought she was going to Finland and then ended up at the tip of Canada.
And Newfoundland instead, which really there's not a whole lot of difference. There's more money in Finland. They have less provincial debt, for sure.
She finds herself, leaving behind her life to move to the Rock. You have two kids, you have Keegan and then you have Finn.
We had a lot of fun before they came.
You did, but you did. There was this
movie
movie
like 3 years, I think, before we. I don't know how Keegan came about. I don't know how that happened, but I'm really glad it did. Change. That was another big change.
You were still though drinking heavily. It was which is fun at first in a relationship. You guys can go and have fun and do anything. And then when do you think Andrea started to go, this isn't quite as normal as us just having a good time and then adulting after,
Yeah, I think, well, you have to ask her, I guess. But so I think 3 years in is when Keegan's came to be. And, there's a pattern behavior now. Like my level of drink, if you're an alcoholic, you don't really realize or want to realize about what level you're at. And I think she may have realized, like, oh my goodness, what have I entailed here? This guy he's not going to stop. He's not going to change. And I think that is, if you're not an alcoholic, that's not an appropriate way to live. So I think she struggled with that. I was gone a lot, so she was home alone. We ended up getting dogs, which were great. And living things came into my house, and she had a positive thing. But she decided she wanted to have kids. And then when the kids came, then the drinking became an issue. Like, it became, our lifestyle. As you know, this is not something. This lifestyle and being a parent, that doesn't work. You can't be a good parent and be an alcoholic.
But your alcoholic was like major benders. Like, you could go, like, it wasn't like you would go and then it was just a constant. Like, you would go missing.
I would go, I was gone if I was on the road, which was every second month for a month. So gone half the time, more or less, or 40% of the time. I could have my benders there, and it didn't affect very much. I would think it made no difference. It probably helped the show in many ways, like it was just, that was expected. That was part of the job. That's what people wanted to see and people paid to see. But coming home, like, I was the leader of a kind of a party parade. Like, in St. John's is full of artists, and a lot of them drink a lot. So when I came home, I'd be a good dad till Friday night. And then if I came in contact with a few of my buddies who may or may not have been dads, like, once we got going, there was no off switch. So the problem was I could kind of control when I started, but once I started, there was no off. There was no stop. So if I had one drink, it was going to go until there was no drinks left. Every time. So that obviously became an issue.
Did you have any fear having children? I mean, with of wanting a certain relationship with your child, of wanting of protecting them a little bit more than maybe I think you felt you were protected? Like, when you became a father, was there a reflection on what had happened in your own childhood? Like, was it in the back of your mind at all?
I don't think at first. I think I was kind of blown away, and I was underprepared, and I still remember when Keegan came out, and he joined us here. I'm like, oh my goodness. What I realized, this is a relationship that will last forever. I will always be his father. He will always be my son. And that was the first big revelation, because I'd never had that relationship before. There's nothing other than death. There will be nothing that'll change how that is our relationship, Marriages can end. But a father to a son, until you're dead, you're always going to be my son. So that really hit me hard. It's like, okay, I'm now in a permanent relationship. This is it. And I have responsibilities. And I would argue that I met my responsibilities, to a point. But it's only as he grew older, as I sobered up, to get to your point, that's when I started to really focus in on that. Like, how do I protect him from what I know to be out there? And I think one of the first things they certainly weren't baptized. They'll never suffer from indoctrination. They'll never. So but my parents are still Catholics. They're still religious people, regardless of what happened to me, that they know. And it hasn't changed anything there. But so they don't. And as indoctrinated people, what I notice is you just don't. You fail. You're kind of tunnel vision. You fail to see any possibilities. You have a comfort default. And I don't have that.
Oh, yeah, I know that. But most people have a comfort default in general in life. You have your comfort level, and then you just, for 90% of the population, I feel, they have a comfort default, and they settle, and they don't deal with, and they mask things. And that's why I find for you to have given up and realized you had to make a massive change. When did this happen? You got like, because this is really the turnaround of this new life that you have. What was rock bottom? Like there has to be, right? There's always got to be some, I would think. I don't know. I haven't been in this situation. Trigger.
When I turned 40, so when I was like 41, 42, I started to have blackouts, right? So by then I drank enough, obviously. And they were scary, right? But I ignored them. I'm like, what, I don't really, they won't always happen, but they started to happen. And as terrifying as they were, I was incapable. I still couldn't, press the stop button. And I still let myself start. And I was in denial. I was an alcoholic. I was in denial. And eventually that's where the bottom was hit. That is what cost me. That's what brought me out, because one of those blackouts put me in a compromising position. It threatened our marriage directly, because I was I cheated. I was in infidelity is the word I'm looking for. And it was during a blackout, and I take responsibility for it. And it was a heartbreaker, like it was, I knew what I was going to lose. And at the time, I didn't even remember what had happened, which is ridiculous. And it all came to a head, and when I admitted it, and I said, I don't know what actually happened, but I'm pretty sure something bad happened here. And I told her. And we were at our island in our house in Newfoundland, in the kitchen. And it was the hardest thing, and I often joke about it now. I don't joke about it, but people always ask, how did you quit drinking? How did you finally stop? And I always say I embraced my higher power, And November 9th, 2011, I told Andrea the truth, like the real truth, and I knew I could lose her, and I almost did. But the ultimatum was, you put that drink down now, that drink, and you might have a chance, but that's the last drink you'll ever have. That one, and I was drinking a glass of white wine, so I put it down, and she had some thinking to do. She went off to Montreal to just kind of decide what she was going to do about this. But it was a really gutting conversation, and she knew what my issues were, and maybe that's what saved me. Maybe that's why she's still here. But I bought All Brown, and maybe I can sing you. This is a song. This is essentially, word for word, the conversation we had. Never saw it coming, happened so fast. Hit me like a headstone over broken glass. Water is rising, hard to breathe. One good reason is all I need. Look out the window, touch the pane. Every raindrop calls out your name. See the clouds rolling across the sky. I feel like I'm broken, I don't know why. You were so hard to hold on to. With every tear I cry, I start to realize I never get over you. I remember every minute I remember the day when I had to admit it, and our world blew away. That sinking feeling down on my knees, a heart revealing a home in need. You were so hard to hold on to. With every tear I cry, start to realize I'll never get over you. Stop looking over your shoulder for someone you won't find. I guess we gotta get over ourselves sometimes. So tell me a story and throw me a line. I'm tired of keeping track of your lies. I feel like I'm falling into black. Give me one good reason and I'll come back. You were so hard to hold on to. With every tear I cry, start to realize I'll never get over you. I guess that's why Old Brown's here. So I can remember those really horrible times and share them in a way that might make sense. But I can tell you there's two ways that we look at that date, that day, that pivotal day. That's the day I never had a drink since. It's been almost 8 years. And I remember that as, in some ways, it's a positive thing. It's the day I quit drinking and changed my life and woke up again and started to do the work. But it's also a terrible day to remember in the sense it's almost the day we got divorced. You know, it was a horribly painful day for us both, especially for Andrea, who's still here.
Yeah. And she's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky. I'm very lucky.
Because I've been around that kitchen table with you guys and seen the family and seen the joy in that house and seen this wonderful relationship that plays back and forth off of each other. And I can't imagine it not being there. But what you just said is that was when you had to start the work. And I think for a lot of people listening to this is the critical kind of take from it. The work. that day, the work is the work. And can you take us through what that's like? Because there are people who are so scared to start it, who are terrified of the amount of work that it's going to take. Like, what were the steps? I mean, yes, that glass of white wine was put aside and you haven't touched it, but the real work then began. I mean, you had someone that was going to stick by you, but there was a lot of internal turmoil that had to be realized.
Well, yeah. Well, people drink and use drugs for reasons, you know, and it's a coping mechanism. And you know, what happened to me after 3 months of sobriety? Well, the first thing that happened is I lost pretty much every friend I ever had because they were all big drinkers. We were of a kind. They were part of the scene, you know. So I was alone. I had Andrea and the boys and our dogs, but I didn't really have any. My phone stopped ringing, you know, in St. John's. And after about 3 months, I started to remember how I started to drinking, who poured me my first drink, you know. And I remembered what the priest did and why I drank, and I started to have nightmares about that. And I never... That was really hard, and I didn't have the booze or the drugs to kind of take that pain away. So the pain that I'd subdued for 30 years was very present, and it was really hard not to drink then. But that's when Old Brown came into play.
At this point, had you been able to vocalize it? And
Only
speak
to
it out?
Andrea. Andrea knew, and I think that's why she stayed. She knew I was damaged, but she was the only person I've ever told. And I think that's why she showed mercy, or stuck with me.
But at that 3-month mark, right, when you're alone, you've lost your social gatherings in your crowd and
my crutch.
And your crutch. How were the conversations? Like, how did these conversations evolve to be able to? Is it all through the music? Was it through the writing?
I started to focus on writing these songs, and it was just a hard time. At the same time, Great Big Sea started to have its issues, and that was by and large me.
So you're still, as you're going through this sobriety, playing.
I'm still in Great Big Sea. Yeah, I'm still in the band. I'm still, and that
you're probably not as much fun on stage.
I tried my best to contribute to. Arguably I got better at many things. I got in better shape. But you know what? It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't an act. The buses are really, the Great Big Sea bus is definitely not a sober place, and the fact that I sobered up made no difference in how it behaved. So it was a very stressful time. So I had this going on, and I had my business being a very dangerous place for me to be. And not a lot of support from within there. And I think the reason for that was because I had... I think they were, I guess they expected me to not be successful. Like me saying I was not going to drink again, they'd heard that before. Because I tried before. I kind of wasn't in total denial. I knew, I knew it was something I couldn't control. And I think they felt that way too. So eventually it would be just a matter of time before I fell off the wagon. So there wasn't a whole lot of focus on my rehabilitation or recovery.
There was no support.
No.
No, it was just like, there were dibs on when we think McCann's going to fall off the wagon.
Pretty much, yeah. So, after 2 years of that, then I finally said, okay, enough's enough. This is not where I have to, and that wasn't an easy decision. But before we got to that point, I started to, wrestle with this, and all I really know is that if I hadn't found a way to come to terms with what actually happened and to try and deal with it and understand why I was drinking, I wouldn't have been able to stop, and I think that's why people fail to remain sober, and a large majority of people who are in recovery have relapses. And I haven't had a relapse, and people are, it'll definitely happen. I'm like, I don't think it will. I don't want to be overconfident, but it's the not facing the truth that ultimately you don't solve it. You can't solve it. Not that you can really solve a problem, but acknowledging it, understanding why. Okay, so now I understand why I'm compelled to drink. Okay, now you have at least a chance of not drinking. So now how are you going to deal with it? So for me, it became music. And it was funny because I never thought it would be, because I really, if you look at the vast majority of the catalog, most of the Great Big Sea stuff was literally about drinking and pointed in that direction. But it's almost like I took the guitar, turned it over, put the strings on upside down, and started to play a different song. Mm-hmm. And but I got to the true meaning of what it's for. Like, this is what music is for.
Therapy. It was your therapy session. Absolutely.
And I haven't really, other than Andrea and this guitar and my friends like you, I don't really see a professional therapist. I've been to a couple of AA meetings. I think they're great. But people always ask me, what do I do? And I was like, the answer is simple. Whatever works for you. What worked for me is music. Is I found a way in and out of these problems, and I can be in the middle of a very hurtful place when I'm singing like that song I just sang. I am living in that moment again, and I finish the song and I can walk out of that room again. And every time I do that, I win. I prove that I can be successful. So that's how it kind of works. but everyone's going to be different. But I think at the core of it is acknowledging the real problem, not what you want the problem to be or what you want to spin it to be. We live in a world of social manipulation of ourselves. We present certain versions of ourselves that are highly polished. And, the best version of any person, the strongest version of any person is exactly who you really are. And who I really am is a survivor of sexual abuse and a person who's in recovery from addiction because of it. And that sounds simple to say, but that's really hard for most people to say. I know it because I talk to them.
Such a massive battle. And that's the thing, is that you are talking to them. So when did your personal journey become the journey of helping others? Because that is where you are making the biggest impact right now. You speak often on mental health issues. You're traveling for this. You're speaking with different groups and organizations. So how did that take on its life, which I still think is your best therapy? And even though you're helping others, every time you're doing it, you're healing yourself.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm not afraid. I guess I'm not afraid to live in that, in my truth. I've learned how to do it, and I wouldn't do it without this guitar in my hands. And I always bring it whenever I do a speaking engagement. I don't have a script or anything. I just kind of have my truth, and I also have a catalog of songs. And part of what I always do is get people to sing, to prove my point. Like, this works. And show people the power of music, but it all starts with the truth. And people started to ask me. Certainly after I came out about it and was open to the public about it, which started back I was invited to speak at a London recovery breakfast. And you know what happened? A person got up. I was going to speak about addiction. This was for the recovery community in London. And I'd been open about my addiction. I just hadn't said any why.
Why, right. There hadn't been a public acknowledgement.
No. And this guy, Paulie O'Byrne, who was abused by a hockey coach, he was the opening act. He got up. He was going to say 5 minutes before I was going to, they knew I wanted to help yourself. The record was out. It was viewed and reviewed as a recovery album. So this is why I was invited there. It was my first speaking engagement. And this guy got up and he quite frankly told the truth about what happened to him. And my eyes were opened. I was blown away by how honest he was, and that he just said it. And he said it, and he didn't catch fire. He didn't die. He said it, and walked off that stage and sat down right next to me. And I realized that I could say, I should do this. Like, I can. And I got up and I didn't think anything of it, but I told for the first time the truth. And it was just a huge relief.
It hadn't been premeditated. It hadn't thought it through. You just...
I knew that that's something I should do. I think I thought about it, but I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't seen somebody do it. So when I get up and I do, and I learned, so that was a huge game changer. Like, it really
Did you
helps
kind
if
of
you
call
see
Andrea after that and just be just to let you know?
Yeah.
The gig went a little different than I thought it was today.
Yeah, I remember we were working on what I was going to say and of course what I actually
what you
said. Very different. And there was fallout. That's, that hit the news, and my parents, it all came out on Twitter and stuff. So that's how I had to kind of put out those fires and actually deal with the aftermath, which was great. But it was worth it because the truth was out there then. Okay, here's what happened, guys. In case anyone was wondering, this happened. And so be it. Like, that was a huge leap forward. And by doing what I do now, the fact that I'm able to get up there, the guy from Great Big Seagull get up and speak his truth and walk off the stage. If I can quit drinking, anybody can, if that guy can, and I think it's important for people to see that. Certainly people in mental health who have issues and addiction issues in particular, to see that guy can do it, and to see how. To see someone really be truthful, even though it's painful, that's powerful. That has an impact, and I think that's why I feel like I have a sense of purpose now. I can help people, not like a doctor can, I don't think, but I can help people because I'm a human being, and I know that everyone feels pain, and everyone avoids it. But what I've learned is that you can't really fix it unless you do it, right? So I just do it.
You did it on that stage that first time, of which this guy was the, hearing it spoken out loud and that they didn't, what was his name?
Paulie O'Byrne, yeah.
So
he's still out there doing it. He's great.
Right, but you have become the Paulie O'Byrne for a lot of people because you stand on stage and then you have people come up to you afterwards.
Yeah, and a lot of people will tell me
and
for the
they
first
tell
time.
you their story for the first time. What
And it always feels better for them.
Does it feels better for them? What happens to you?
It's always hard to hear, and it's something you take on. But at least I have compassion for those. Like I understand, and I know what it's like to say it. It's really hard to say the truth. Like it's hard to say it. And you know what? You can say it all you want, and for many people, they don't care what the truth is. My parents still struggle with the truth. Like they still can't really. It's not something we talk about. Like it's okay. Well, let's move along. People hear what they want to hear. So you have to face your truth for yourself, and expect that you may not even be heard, but you'll hear you. It's still important, because if you don't acknowledge what it really is, how are you going to fix it? All you're going to do is throw money at it or dance around the issue, and put band-aids on this flare up and that flare up. Get to the core of the problem, the real pain. And I think in this world today, like again, we live in a world where alternate facts are a thing. This is how this is something we live with. Spin is everything. If you look at American politics, the truth about like what just happened with Christine Blasey Ford, whether you believe her or not, and I do, what happened there, and how it's even as of today, and I'm not sure when this podcast is going to happen. The truth comes out, a truth exists, and two sides start at it and fight about it, and it becomes a political football. So the truth today is under more duress, the actual truth, than it ever has before. And as parents, you and I know that we're dealing with a different generation. But I know that the truth, there is only one truth. Like in any given circumstance, one thing is true. One fact is true. And if we can't get to what that is, and that becomes a moving target, then the solution is not achievable. So it's the most important thing. And it's the hardest thing to do. The reason we avoid it is because it's hard.
Where do you get the greatest satisfaction now? I mean, I know there was satisfaction being up on that stage and having a good time and seeing the entire bar jumping up and down to your song. Where is your satisfaction now?
I can't get no. I really love being in a small hall, just singing, just being the best version of me is on stage. And I want to be there with Old Brown, and I love when I'm able to light up a room and reach out and emotionally like grab people's hearts, squeeze them a little bit, and let them go.
When they come to see you, are they looking to be inspired? Are they looking, oh my God, it's Séan McCann, he's going to play a Great Big Sea song? Or are they looking to hear your story? Like, what do you anticipate? When you look at that audience, what do you think they're hoping to get from you?
I've learned not to anticipate. I reserve the right. I always write out like a list of songs, because if I don't, I forget that I know any. So I write out the list of songs that I want to sing. Yeah. Okay. And I bring them up and I lay it on stage in no particular order. And then I do what I think is going to connect most. The first thing I do, and I always tell the light guy, I need to see everyone's face, so you can't be black. So I get a little light, and then I see, and I assess the situation. And I have so many songs that I.
So you look at your crowd, you see who's in the audience.
Yeah, and I guess the difference, what I do now is it is a interactive experience. I see real power in conversation and what we're doing actually here. And I want that to be the case. And I know what the alternative is if I go out and just hammer it in and push my agenda at an audience. That's another way. Usually it's solved with a drummer and volume. Like you can just be that, and maybe you just dumb it down. There is one message. I've been in that band and I'm done with that. I find great power when someone can be genuine. I'm most moved when I see people genuinely affected, whether it be cracking them up or making them cry. But I want to affect people on a deeper level, and that's why I say more, and that's why I remain unscripted, because you can't really go out there and premeditate that. I think you have to be in the moment. You have to really be present, and that's hard to do too. But I've found whatever reason, by acknowledging my own truth, I can let myself be vulnerable. I've learned that. And I do it every night, whether I'm speaking at a breakfast speaking event or I'm doing Almont Town Hall on a Saturday night. I get there by making myself vulnerable. And that has an impact on people. People see that if it's real. And that's just gotta get the real. But that's why I show up with just this. I could have a band. I don't need one anymore. That's not the power I'm looking for. The power I'm trying to get out there is from the middle of me, and I'm trying to get to the middle of you. And I want to squeeze your heart and let it go and light you up. I want to melt that room.
We've had interesting conversations. I mean, you were one of the first people I talked to when I was going through my transition, and I was kind of like, you know what, Sean, like, this is what I'm thinking.
I know exactly how it feels.
And we had these conversations, and there was a lot of talk, about, letting go of ego and, and realizing relationships are going to change, and the people who you thought were going to be, a support system have not been. It's I think authenticity is what people, I think, like and are drawn to in an individual, and I think the crowds appreciate that with you.
I believe that. It's what I'm drawn to, and you are. But I hope that that's where we end up. But the world, what seems to win a lot of the times is not authentic. And even if we know it, it still works on us in many ways. But I still think it's the most important thing to be authentic. But it's rare to find, but it's within us to be that. It's facing up to who you really are.
When you're not with the guitar, and you're in the, I know that you run. When you're running, because I know you need the physical release also, right? And you said you got in good shape, and you're kind of different in that sense. What are you listening to? It's because you're not listening to your songs.
I don't listen to any. When I run, it's always outdoors, so I don't.
Okay, so nothing. It's just you and your thoughts.
The birds.
Oh
the wind.
My God, that's killer! Really, you can take that in. I need I need something pushing me. What's pushing you?
I don't like. I literally part of the running thing for me is I don't like running indoors, so it's always outdoors. I don't run much in the winter, which is a drag, because I don't like the gym. Being indoors is not. I have a machine that I use at home, but it's all part of it. I think being in nature is a big deal. Movement is a big deal. And I've learned that. I've met some really cool people like you along the way. And one of them taught me a huge lesson, and that music is medicine for me, but movement is medicine for a friend of mine named Clara Hughes, who's an Olympian. And, she got to keep moving, but she's just being out in nature. Being physical, again, is something that's, as parents, it's really hard to get your kids to do that. The digital world is so compelling, so fascinating, so seductive. But, there's digital addiction is a big thing now. And if you talk to the counselors, how do you treat it? Go outdoors.
Get outside.
So for me, be outdoors, be in nature. I do miss that about Newfoundland, and I love Ontario is beautiful, but it's like every acre of land is literally spoken for. Where I come from, 90% of the province of Newfoundland is crown land, so anybody can be there. Dogs off leash in any capacity, you can sleep there. And for where I lived in St. John's, which is right downtown, 10 minutes drive in any direction, and you're in the middle of nowhere. And I think it's important to put yourself there every now and then.
In the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. Whether that's on a kayak out in St. Lawrence or in the woods where you're just nowhere, where you can't hear a sound other than the birds and the bees and whatever else is out there. And that's why I keep getting drawn to the mountains and back to Newfoundland and into nature. I think it's a big help to our mental abilities. I don't like the screens for me are it's a double-edged sword. I promote there, tell people that's where everyone is on Facebook. And Facebook tells me my big demographic is women age 45 to 54. But it's really hard to get them to come to shows. They all comment on every post. And they're supportive, but to get them to come to the show is a big deal because Facebook is so freaking awesome, right? But it's not healthy to be there all the time. You can't do on Facebook what you can do face to face. You just can't.
People are gonna look at this or listen to this podcast. What 3 things, if I can put you on the spot, do you want them to take from this about facing adversity, about living in a dark place? Like what could you say to them?
Probably the thing that my kids say to me before I go on stage, whether it be speaking or playing, every time they call me or text me and say one thing: don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up, Dad. And I think you can solve a lot of problems. Because I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, the sharpest tool in the shed, but I didn't give up. And sheer persistence can get you a long way. And I would argue that Great Big Sea got a long way because of persistence, more than skill, So don't give up is a big deal. 2, we're stronger than you think. We're pretty tough. Human beings are really tough. And the stuff we put ourselves through, literally, even if we just eliminate the stuff we choose to do that's negative, whether that be diet or fitness or, our work habits, we already, without even realizing, you look at your any given life, you probably survived more than you think. We're tougher than we know. We're very much strong. We're strong. And if we forget that, that's when we falter. So believe that you're strong, because you are. And because, the other thing would be just you have to do the work. And the work is always truth-based. If it's some kind of fiction, you're going to be off target and you're going to waste your energy. So make sure your target is the truth, the real truth, because then you'll be successful. Then the work begins.
I don't even know what time. Veronica hasn't even let me know. Oh gosh.
Well, like 2 hours.
I didn't even look over. I'm like, I don't even want to know what time it is. I'm gonna let you finish. Just sing us out. I'll just sing us for a second. I just want to say, oh my gosh, I don't even think I mentioned what episode we're at. I was just so into. You started singing a guitar. So this was episode 36 of Living Your Life with Leanne Lang.
What? I'm not number 1? I'm number 36.
You knew about Living Your Life with Leanne Lang before it was even conceptualized. Do you remember that? Kind of sitting around a table going, what am I going to do? Please like, subscribe, any comments, let your friends know about the podcast. It's so nice to see it growing. And it's persistence, right? Just keep on, people. But I'm realizing as I'm looking in this world, sometimes you need some help from people on the outside. So if you can like or subscribe, let people know about the podcast, that would be incredibly great. And of course, thanks to Extension Marketing for always taking on the role as being a proud sponsor and supporter of this. Séan McCann, I do love you dearly. I love your family. I can't wait for the next little round table at one of our kitchen tables. What song are you going to leave us with?
I'm going to sing this one. Because I know the path you're on. I know, and you're on the right one. And I know you're going to be successful. Because we're made of more than blood and bone. We're made of love. You know I love you. You know I care. You know I miss you when I'm not there. I carry you with me everywhere I go, because I love you, and now you know I climb the mountains, I cross the sea, the lonesome valley and the grand prairie. I carry you with me for all to see, because I love you, Leanne. You can count on me. I've done so many miles alone. I've learned so many things I should have known. I let myself get led off track. But you keep me coming back. You know I love you. You know I care. You know I'll miss you when you're not there. I carry you with me everywhere I go, because I love you. I am not alone. Thanks for having me on your show.
I remember that song. Thanks, Sean.